Everybody, welcome to Sunday Morning Live. In this live stream, we're going to talk about faith versus feelings. I'll get to that in just a second. I want to make sure I'm sharing this correctly in the right spaces. So let it breathe, see if anybody jumps on. Thanks to everybody who's been supporting us financially and also just supporting us with views. Really, really appreciate that. So let's see. I'm going to make sure I get it in the group this time. I apologize to those of you that are in the New Day Global group if you haven't been able to watch it on Sundays. I didn't realize my settings. For whatever reason, it's not sharing directly even when I connect it to the group from Restream. I'm not sure why that is. I haven't been able to troubleshoot that yet. And then when I share it from my personal page, I didn't realize, but the presettings that Restream uses to stream from is set to friends rather than to public. So I have to go in and switch it to public and then share it. So hopefully, if you're with the New Day Global group and you want to watch this live or watch this later, hopefully it's showing up now. And again, I apologize for that. So I got a great question this week, and I appreciate people sending me questions or putting them in the comments because it gives me ideas for content, things like that. And I spent quite a bit of time in last week's message talking about how important belief is when it comes to contacting the extra physical, the non-physical, invisible worlds and invisible realms. What we might call the supernatural. I know some people get really triggered by that word. I don't know why. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It's just a word used to describe something that is occurring outside the regular course of events. Okay. So anyway, a few people are jumping on. Debbie Sturt says, good morning. Lulu Marie says hello from Folsom, California. Hello, good to have you on. Again, like all the comments don't show up either. I don't know why. Yeah, so anyway, I got this question. Let me come back. Slow down. Let me come back and talk about what I was meaning by that. What I was saying was that you cannot experience something that you can't perceive, and you can't perceive something that you do not believe. So our perceptions, our brains, the way that they work, just in a very basic sense, is we need to understand that we're being inundated with sensory input, sensory information, and that's just from the external world. That doesn't even count what's going on inside of us in terms of our thoughts, our inner self-talk, our internal daydreaming and stuff like that. So we've got all this stuff going on just on the inside. Think about that. You've got a constant sort of self-talk, constant thinking that's going on. There are images constantly emerging from the subconscious. So you're always dreaming, essentially. You're always dreaming. So you might say daydreams or whatever, but there's always images there. And then in the external world, we're being bombarded with sensory input, with light and everything that we can see, with sound and everything that we can hear, with what we feel in our bodies, like sitting against the chair, feet on the floor, that kind of thing, and what we can smell, what we can taste. Those things are always present to us. But the truth is that there is so much more coming at us than what we are able to focus on. We're only able to focus on a few things at a time. And so the brain, in order for us to operate, has to edit out the vast majority of information and sensory input and perceptual input that's out there. Has to completely edit it out so that you don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't feel it unless your mind is directed to it. And then it's allowed through these filters into your model, perceptual model of what's actually going on and what's happening. So how does the brain do that? How does the brain sort for information to know what to let in and what to keep out? Well, your perceptual filters are governed by patterns and beliefs. So in other words, your brain is trained to look for patterns. So we know that things occur in various different patterns. So if we see the beginning of a pattern, then we know what to expect at the end because it is a pattern. So comparing the way English is written versus the way Spanish is written is a good example of this. It's interesting to me that in Spanish, the punctuation is put at the beginning of the sentence. So like if it's a question mark, you're told at the very beginning that it's going to be a question. We always put punctuation at the end of the sentence, which means that you will have read the sentence before you know the punctuation, the voice in which it's being said. So how is it that we're able to read a question as a question before we get to the question mark? It's because our brain has learned the patterns of writing in English, and we know how to anticipate what's about to come. And we do that with everything. This is why when something happens that's completely outside our pattern of reality, not everybody is going to perceive that pattern. I'm sorry, not everybody's going to be able to perceive that if it's too far outside the pattern. So I talked quite a bit about that last week. So I talked about if you don't believe in anything extra physical, in other words, if you don't believe in a spiritual dimension or an astral plane that isn't readily available and isn't even available to physical perception because it's on a different plane. It's not part of the physical plane. It's part of another plane of existence or another plane of reality. If you don't believe in that, you are not going to be able to perceive that because your beliefs govern your perceptions. Let me give you another example of this. How many of you have ever gone out and bought a car that you thought was unique? You went to the car lot and maybe the salesperson sold you on a car. I remember we bought a purple PT Cruiser back when the PT Cruisers were popular. And we thought we were getting a unique car because we didn't realize there was that many PT Cruisers on the road. And we certainly didn't realize there was that many purple PT Cruisers that were on the road. But as soon as we had one, as soon as we owned one and started driving one, we started seeing it everywhere. So sometimes when you learn about a new concept or a new phrase, prior to like you think you just heard this phrase. Like I remember doing an episode with Derek Day not too long ago on the Overton window. And he's like, have you heard of the Overton window? I'm like, no, I've never heard of that. So I had to do some research on the Overton window. And we did a episode on the Overton window. And now I hear it all the time on the news or in various different conversations, particularly relating to subjects to which the Overton window would apply. So I've got to believe that I was privy to that. I mean, not privy to it, but that I was hearing that. It's not like people just started talking about the Overton window on programs that I'm watching just because I learned about it. So that means that more than likely I edited out a lot of that information, even though I'm watching the program and thinking that I'm taking it in. That's just the way the brain works. So if you don't believe in the God, you're not going to experience God. If you don't believe in angels, you're not going to experience angels. If you don't believe in different realms like the astral realm or the astral plane, or if you don't believe that there are non-physical entities or intelligences that we can interact with and benefit from and get wisdom from and grow from, then you're not going to experience any of that stuff, because your perceptions will be shut down to experiencing that, because your beliefs govern your perceptions. That's just basic neuroscience. Nobody argues with that. We have perceptual filters. They're governed and or influenced by our belief system, by the patterns that we expect to see in the world. And so to a large degree, we never see the world or reality or the cosmos or anything as it is. We see it as we perceive it to be. And so that's where I was coming from when I was talking about you have to believe in something that you can't see in order to experience it. You have to believe in something you can't feel in order to perceive it. Now, for those of you that, maybe get triggered because I mentioned, if you don't believe in God, you're not going to experience God. If you don't believe in these other realms, you're not going to experience them. And you say, those things don't exist because you're strictly a materialist. Then this can also apply to you as well. I don't want to lose you. Come back. I don't want to lose you, because there can still be a benefit to believing in something that you can't see. For example, the future. The future is not here yet. The future is unseen. Any hope that you have for anything in your life, it could be, I hope I get to go on a vacation to Europe next year, or I hope I meet my soulmate, or I hope, maybe you have hopes about who you hope wins the election. Those things are not present right now. So you can take everything that I'm saying about when I'm talking about unseen reality, you can apply it to everything that's not present right now. So your hope is unseen. So it doesn't have to be mystical or magical or spooky or other planes for this to work, or for this to be a concept that can benefit you and help you. So the question I got was this. The person essentially said, I was brought up in faith teachings in the church that told me, I'm not moved by what I feel, not moved by what I see, not moved by what I hear, not moved by what I feel. I'm only moved by what I believe. And that was very toxic and very damaging to me, this person says. And so what's the difference between what I heard in church about faith versus feelings? Don't follow your feelings, follow faith. Don't follow your feelings, follow the word of God. What's the difference between that, which was toxic to me, and what you're saying, Aaron, about let me just say what you're saying about faith versus feelings. And I thought that was a really good question, so I thought I would attempt to address this today. So a little bit of review, the first part of this from what I talked about last week, and then the question, what about faith versus feelings? And then this is my attempt to address that. So let's take them one at a time. Let's talk about feelings and thoughts. Let's talk about thoughts and feelings, our cognitions, the words that we think, the pictures that we think in our head, and our emotions, the feelings that we feel in our bodies. And let's talk about how these work. So Alfred Korzybski, really intelligent individual in the last century, wrote a book called Science and Sanity. And as far as I know, he coined the phrase, the map is not the territory. I'm going to say that again. The map is not the territory. And he was using this phrase in reference to our neurological maps, our mind-body perceptions of reality. He would call that the map. And then the world at large out there, he would call the world out there, he would call the world at large. So that would be the territory. That's what I'm trying to say. So the world at large out there, as it is, not filtered through any of our perceptions, but as it is, that's the territory. And then as information comes into us, like I was already saying, we cannot deal with the entirety of the territory. So we have to create a mental and emotional map of the territory. And so that's what our brains do. So we delete, like any map, it is a representation of the territory, but it is not the territory itself. In other words, I can't decide that I want to go to Hawaii this year and just throw a world map on the floor and stand on the place that represents Hawaii and say, I'm in Hawaii now. Everybody knows that would be crazy talk, right? That would be foolishness. Imagine if I was foolish enough to stand on the map and stand on Hawaii and take a picture of myself and post it to my social media and say, this is me in Hawaii. Well, if I did that, that would be to confuse the map with the territory, correct? But now, if a map is a good map, if it's a helpful map, if it's a map that can get me to where I'm going, then it needs to, in some sense, even though it's reductionary, even though it's smaller, even though it deletes miles and mountains and curves and all this stuff, it distorts the territory in order to create a usable and effective map. Then I can use that map. I know we use GPSs now, so I'm gonna have to come up with a different analogy for a generation that has never used a map. But if the map is accurate enough, represents the territory closely enough, then I can get to where I want to go by following that map. If the map is outdated, if the map is just flat out wrong, totally incorrect, and not an accurate representation of the territory at all, then I'm going to get lost. I'm going to end up someplace that I don't want to be. And so in his book, Science and Sanity, Alfred Korzybski uses this analogy of the map and the territory to talk about our thoughts and feelings, our neurological maps and perceptual maps of reality, and how all of us can only operate off of our mental and emotional maps, our perceptions, and not off the actual territory itself. So in other words, our thoughts and feelings are there like a map that is to guide us through life. Our thoughts and feelings could be like our guidance system, to update it a little bit, maybe like our GPS, right? And Korzybski would say this: the more accurate your map corresponds to the reality of your life and the reality of the world around you, the more accurately it corresponds to that, the more sane you are. The more there is divergence, disparity, difference, distortion, just flat out, the map doesn't represent the territory at all, then he would call that insanity or unsanity in some cases. So, at least from this perspective, if we want to get somewhere in life, let's say we want to experience the spiritual fulfillment by connecting with other realms and other beings, or let's say that we want to just navigate our way to a new relationship or to a new job, or we want to make more money, or we want to try to get healing and health in our bodies, then we need to have a map that gets us from where we are to where we're going to be. And the more accurately that map represents the territory, the better chance we have of getting there. So that's the first thing I want to say about the role of feelings and thoughts. Your thoughts and feelings only exist inside of you. You're the only person on the planet who actually experiences your thoughts and your feelings. So the only reality that they have is the reality that you give them or that you experience. You're the only one that experiences the reality of your thoughts and your feelings. You're the only one that experiences your map of reality, and your map is not the same as my map. Your map is completely unique to you. My map is completely unique to me. And our maps are made up of our life experiences. I have trauma at places in my map that maybe you don't have trauma in yours. You have trauma in places in your map, your life experience, where your thoughts and feelings were affected by negative impact of others, by abuse, by traumatic events, by things that happened to you, especially in childhood, that impact the way that you experience the world, that make up your map of who you are, your map of reality, etc., and so on. My experiences certainly make up my map. This is why my map, for the most part, has always been that there is an unseen reality out there, that there is a divine presence, a source, a creator out there, that there's an astral plane out there, because I've had so much experience with those things in my life over and over again. That's why I cannot let go of belief in the supernatural, and I'll fight even for the word supernatural. And people don't understand that, and people might get upset about that, but it's because I have a very enriched map in terms of my experiences throughout my life about those things. And I can't just throw away my map. Now, there are a lot of other people, they've never experienced anything. They've never experienced anything on the level of the paranormal. They've only ever really experienced the material physical plane, except at night when they're dreaming or in consciousness. But sometimes they don't even recognize that. So for the most part, cause and effect in life has happened in a very structured way on the physical plane. They have no experience with that other stuff. And they've been informed by the culture, by society, by study, by skeptics, that those things don't exist and they're not real. So of course, in their map, there's not going to be any place, there's not going to be any roads drawn on their map that are going to get them to some of the places that I have been. And so it's really important to understand that. And your map is uniquely for you because you are uniquely positioned in your life. Nobody else. So think about it this way. If you have a group of people that start a race, let's say they start what do they call those, like a super marathon or mega marathon, where there's people that run, 100 miles all at once. They do these like extreme sports, right? So everybody starts at the same place and follows the same path. Then the same map will work for everybody because everybody's starting in the same place and trying to get to the same place. There is nobody on planet Earth right now, nobody that's ever lived on planet Earth that's starting at your starting place, that is in your exact location in life. So therefore, no one else's map is going to work for you entirely. Now, they may be able to help you redraw your map in certain areas, but you are not able to take anyone else's map and make your life work. And this is one of the mistakes that we make in religion. Religion tries to give us a one-size-fits-all map. We're all starting at the same place. We're all trying to get to the same place. And here's the map of how you do it. And it's not very nuanced, and it's very reductionist. The idea is that we're all just born in sin, and the goal is to get to heaven. And the map to get there is to put your faith in Jesus, and then try to follow the teachings of the Bible throughout your life, and you'll get there. And when we all get to heaven, we'll sing and shout the victory. So that's the religious map. The political map will say that we all have these beliefs about what's going to make the country better or what's going to improve our quality of life if you vote for these politicians. And unfortunately, we live in a country where we have a two-party system. I think democracy probably lends itself more, especially the way it's set up in America, to a two-party system. I know there's other countries that have more than two parties, but they don't do elections like we do elections. Their government's not set up the same way. But it's trying to get everybody to start with the same map. And so I really want to emphasize this. Your map is your map, and your map is a very important map. And No one else's map is going to get you where you want to be because nobody else is starting in the same place that you're starting. So that's super important. That's super important to remember when you're giving advice. That's super important to remember when you're reading a self-help book. Like, so many people will go into self-help books, they'll go to seminars, they'll watch videos like this one, they'll take classes, and they just get frustrated because they don't see any progress in their life. And part of the reason for that, not the only reason, but part of the reason for that is because someone else's map isn't necessarily going to work for you. So usually what happens in like the self-help sort of industry is people will say, you know, I took these steps and made $1 million, or I worked my way out into mental and emotional health by taking these steps, whatever it may be. Well, that was their map that got them from point A to point Z. Now, their map may work for you, or you may just be able to take parts of their map that work for you, or their map may not work for you at all. And then you just get more discouraged because you think, oh, I must be the worst person on the planet. How come it works for everybody else, but it doesn't work for me? So I'm saying all of this to try to take the pressure off of you, to help you realize that it's a very individual process in a lot of ways. And then the second thing I want to say is be careful about advice giving. Be careful about advice giving because you may think a person is somewhere on the journey. In other words, like another example of a map, when we used to go to malls or airports, and you find the map and you're looking at it, and the first thing you have to find is you are here, right? You have to know you are here. This is where you're at. So I could end up giving advice to somebody without understanding exactly where they are. I might think they're here, but they're actually over here, or they're down here, or they're on the other side, but I think they're here. And so I'm telling them, well, if you just do this, 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 and this, you'll get to where you want to be. And in fact, if they were to take my advice, it might not work out for them because they're not where I think they are. I hope this is making sense. If this is making sense to you, let me know in the comments. I'm going to see if I'm getting any on Facebook. In 1 second. Yeah, not getting any, interesting, not getting any comments from Facebook users, at least none that I'm seeing at all in the comments here or on my page. So anyway, but I do show I've got a number of people watching. So yeah, if this is making sense, put it in the comments. If it's not making sense, put some questions up there and I will see if I can clarify some stuff. All right, now, so that's the whole feelings, mental and emotional part of this. That's just stating what they are. They are a guidance system for us. And we need to understand that. We need to embrace that. Now, let's look at how the church taught us about faith versus feelings. So the whole basis for salvation in the typical evangelical Christian message and Catholic, regardless, is that we have to believe in a historical event that we weren't present for. We have to believe in a historical event, a la the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus and the ascension of Jesus. And that somehow removes our sins and reconciles us to God. So we have to believe in a historical event, and then we have to believe in an event that our eyes and experience, and especially our emotions, tell us is not possible, and that is that someone can rise from the dead and live forever. Because with the exception of Christ, or Jesus, to the best of our knowledge, that's never happened before. So we're required to believe something that we've never experienced. So the whole foundation of it is to sort of deny your experience and believe in something that you haven't experienced. Well, Aaron, isn't that what you're telling people to do if they want to experience the other realms? Not exactly. Stay with me. I think you'll see the difference. Now, other people may have been taught differently, but I was certainly taught repression. We got into the Neil Anderson books, The Bondage Breaker, Freedom in Christ, all that stuff. Got into the faith movement, certainly some of the faith teachings, Kenneth Hagin, E.W. Kenyon. And then you connect that with the fruit of the Spirit. And at the end of the day, what we were taught was suppression. We were taught suppression. We were not taught expression. We were taught suppression. So let's take some of the bondage breaker stuff. Let's say that you've had a lot of trauma. Let's say that you just carry a lot of shame, a lot of guilt. It could come from anything. It could even be induced by the church, right? You feel guilty for being who you are. You feel guilty for desires that you have, or anger that you carry, or jealousy or bitterness. You're not supposed to have any of those things. And so if you give expression to those things, then you're not walking in the Spirit. So the idea then is to believe what the Bible says about who you are, that you are a child of God, that you are the righteousness of God in Christ, that you are accepted in the beloved, that you are more than a conqueror, that if God be for you, who can be against you? See, all these things. And that may go totally contrary to what you feel, because you may feel completely worthless. You may feel completely helpless. You may feel completely abandoned. You may feel all these various different things. And you're told, well, no. Don't listen to your feelings. Don't pay attention to your feelings. Just believe these things. And so make these affirmations, memorize these scriptures, say these things to yourself over and over again until you believe it. And then when you have the contradiction of what you're feeling that's pulling on you, just ignore that. That is a lie. This other over here is truth. Now, the faith movement got a little bit more extreme with it when it came to physical healing. They would say, if you're sick in your body, if you deny the symptoms, or some would try to nuance it and say you deny the right of the symptom to be there, and you acknowledge that you are healed by the stripes of Jesus, that you were healed 2,000 years ago by the stripes of Jesus. And as long as you apply that to your situation, you will be healed. So then people oftentimes moved into denial about their condition. I know people who early detection would have saved their lives in the case of people who got cancer. Let's say breast cancer or prostate cancer, or what's some of the others that they can check for, colon cancer. If they'd have just gone for the early detection, probably would have saved their lives. But while that lump's growing in their breast, or they're having other kinds of symptoms, they're busy denying the symptoms and believing that by his stripes they were healed. Or they somehow think that going and getting medical care is a sign of a lack of faith. And in this day and age, people even have, conspiratorial ideas about, big pharma and big medicine. And I get it. I understand where that's coming from. I think our medical system sucks, personally. So that could be layered in there as well. And so people maybe don't go for the treatments that could help them and that could maybe in some cases even be life-saving for them because they're believing, by his stripes I was healed. So my point is that the church was teaching suppression. Now, I never want to do that as a clinician, as a trauma-informed therapist, as a student of psychology, as someone who's been traumatized myself and had to wrestle through a lot of various different emotions that were unpleasant and that the church would call wicked and evil and sinful. I never want to encourage or teach anything that causes suppression or repression. I think it was Carl Jung that said, whatever we resist persists. Whatever we resist persists. In other words, the more we try to shove those things down, the more the stronger they push back in our lives. And so we get into this whole warfare of spirit, soul, body, where we're really going against ourselves. We're really value judging ourselves in terms of our emotional experiences. I see this in a lot of New Age teaching as well when we're talking about high vibration versus low vibration. It's almost as though the Western mind cannot get out of this good and evil dualism that we have been enculturated into for literally centuries. There always has to be an other out there that's bad or that's evil. There's always got to be something within me that's less than something else. So I'll hear people that have really sound, great teaching, but they're still talking about the higher and lower nature. They're still creating a hierarchy in emotional expression and emotional experience. So in other words, love is high vibration. Peace is high vibration. And jealousy, anger, bitterness, wrath, lust, those are low vibrations. So you want to stay out of those low vibration energies and you want to stay up in the high vibration energies. The problem is that for a lot of us, those low vibrations are part of our map that's telling us where we should go and what we should do in our lives. And so by ignoring those things, it's not helpful for us. So we're still trying to exalt or elevate one nature above the other. I think the goal is, I can just only speak for myself here. The goal is not to always be in a state of bliss, because if you're always in a state of bliss, the bliss itself is going to become boring. We are here to experience contrast. We are here to experience the polarities. And no polarity in and of itself is good and bad. So in other words, if we don't have suffering, then bliss is not bliss, because bliss just becomes boredom. The law of diminishing returns, if that makes sense to you. Certainly we don't want to just bed down in suffering either, but we're here to experience the contrast. So one's not better than the other. So I don't want to say, well, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, these are higher vibrations and better than, bitterness, anger, jealousy, wrath, lust, greed, whatever. It's all part of the human experience and it's all valuable. So the goal, I think, is not domination of one over against the other, but rather it's harmonization of those things together. So in other words, when the Bible states, the lion shall lay down with the lamb, it's a place of harmony. The child shall play with the cobra and not be bitten. It's that place of harmony. It's the place of actually coherence, of finding the middle way or the middle path, or the middle pillar that they talk about in Kabbalah, if you're familiar with any of those teachings. So we want to be able to harmonize our emotions. We want to be able to harmonize our feelings. We don't want to repress them. We don't want to suppress them. But now, at the same time, there's a ditch on the other side. There's an error on the other side. And the error on the other side, and I've heard people encourage this, thinking they were so enlightened and so spiritual when they were telling people to do this. And I'm just listening to them. I'm just grabbing my head, like, what the heck? But this idea that we need to go into our traumas, we need to go into our hurts, we need to go into those areas, those shadow areas of our soul, and we need to fully experience them and feel them and all that stuff. And there are elements of truth to that. But what they don't tell you, if they don't nuance it, and if you're not careful, and this can happen to you very, very, very easily, is that you will get caught in a loop in those negative experiences, those traumas, those emotions, those sort of negative thoughts and feelings. This is what depression is. This is what anxiety is. It's where I get sucked into a whirlpool, if you will, or a quicksand of negativity. And by negativity, I mean all those emotions that are hurtful and unpleasant. They're part of our map. They're part of our experience. They're important. But we don't want to camp out there. We don't want to get stuck in that whirlpool or that whirlwind that's either going to suck us up or suck us down, however you want to think about it. But the point is that it becomes a habitual cycle, so that all I'm thinking about is my negative thoughts. All I'm thinking about is my negative situation. All I'm thinking about is the negative situation that's out there in the world. And I go to bed and I try to go to sleep and I can't shut my mind off. And this can be really toxic for people in terms of their own self-identity, where they go down a whirlpool of shame to where they feel like they have no worth. They feel like they have no value. They feel like they have no power. So what they're thinking and feeling is constantly stating to them and reinforcing to them that you're powerless, that you're helpless, that you have no value, that you cannot make mistakes, that you're like eternally damaged, fatally flawed. And that becomes their base reality. That's where they are on the map. That's where they're living from. And so they're trying to navigate through life, but they're approaching every situation from the one down position. You think about in wrestling, you know, starting in a one down position, and they're not ever able to get up again. So they go into work and they experience anxiety because they have no sense of self-efficacy that they can accomplish the task. They go into social situations, they experience social anxiety because they have no sense that anyone is going to love them or like them. They may like the mask. I'm putting on a mask, I'm putting on a persona, I'm putting on a front for people, and they may like the persona, they may like the front. But if they ever get to know the real me, and what I'm really like on the inside, what I'm really like as a person, then they're going to reject me, and I'm going to be cast out, I'm going to be abandoned. So now I'm having trouble navigating my social world at large out there, because these are the things that my mental and emotional map is telling me. Financially, I'm afraid to put in that resume for a better job, or I'm afraid to leave. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. So I'm afraid to take this leap. I've lived my life in this religious community and with these religious beliefs, and I just know that I'm probably not as smart as everybody else. Everybody else is probably smarter than me. They probably know something that I don't know. So even though I feel cramped in and I feel like this place is stuffy for me, I want to get out. And so what happens is that if we go too much into our thoughts and our feelings, especially when they're negative, we almost mummify ourselves. You can think about all that negative thinking and all that negative feeling as bandages that we're trying to wrap around a wound, and we just keep wrapping it and 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 wrapping it until we're completely mummified, and we're encased in bandages of our own creation, trying to make ourselves feel better, but going down this negative journey, right? Hopefully this is making sense to you. That can lead a person to complete hopelessness, and that can actually lead a person to a really dark place. And then it's almost impossible sometimes for them to get out of it on their own. So this is an example where I can recognize the validity of my thoughts and feelings as a map. In other words, you didn't just get to that place, or I didn't just get to that place of total despair, total self-rejection, total self-abandonment or self-hatred or shame. And it's on a spectrum, right? So wherever you're at on the scale, I didn't get to that place of feeling worthless on my own. I didn't just wake up one day and say, I know I'm going to choose this for my reality. So you didn't choose that. There were events that happened along your journey, messengers that were sent to you along your journey that filled your mind with that, heartbreaking circumstances and events that happened to you that were devastating or overwhelming. Life can be overwhelming. Life can be devastating. Life can definitely knock you down. And so those thoughts and feelings accurately represent where you've been and where you are now. That's really important for you to understand. Those thoughts and feelings accurately represent where you've been and where you are now, at least to the degree that a map can represent the territory. Now, we do tend to have a negativity bias, and we forget about, when we look back at our past and we think it's all been horrible, we have a tendency to edit out of our map the good, the times that people believed in us. We'll remember that teacher that told us that we sucked and we couldn't do it, and we won't remember that tutor that was encouraging us the whole time that we were smart enough to get it after that event. We'll remember sometimes the coach that told us that we'd never amount to anything, but we don't remember the mentor who came along in an area of our life, maybe another coach or just in another area of life, who encouraged us and believed in us and helped us to achieve things. So we do have to account for a negativity bias in our mental maps, our mental and emotional maps. But regardless, it tells you where you are. So suppression isn't going to do it. Acknowledging this is what I think, this is what I feel, this is where I'm at in life is really important. But then to acknowledge, even though this is where I'm at, even though this is what I feel, it does not mean that my map is accurately representing the actual territory. So let me give you a very simple one. I sit there and say, I'm worthless. I have no value to anybody. That may feel absolutely true. And you may be able to look out at your life and maybe you don't have friends. Maybe your family's grown up and moved on. I don't know your circumstance or situation. But chances are you're able to look out on the horizon and find lots of things that are going to justify your sense that you have no value. Now, the truth, let's do it this way even. You're the worst person on the planet. You're the worst person on the planet. So out of 6-7 billion people on the planet, you're the worst. Every human being is intrinsically valuable, if for no other reason, there'll never be another one like you. I mean, I guess there are doppelgangers. I guess this is a thing. My kids are enlightening me. A lot of things that I thought were true, I'm finding out aren't true. But yeah, you may have a physical doppelganger out there, and you may have some things in common with them. You guys can look that up. Maybe a topic for a different day. But nobody's had the opportunities to live the life that you have. I mean, you are uniquely valuable and special. You say, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. See, this is where it is helpful if you can recognize that your map is distorted, that your beliefs may be untrue, they may not accurately reflect the territory, so that you can redraw them. That's the only way to get out of that storm. That's the only way to get out of that whirlpool. If anybody tells you if you just sit with it long enough and feel it long enough, it'll eventually go away, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. At some point, you have to acknowledge something as true that is not relevant to your experience. Does not mean that I deny where I'm feeling. Once again, I feel worthless. I feel hopeless. I feel ashamed. All right. Now, here's the other thing I want to address. In the church, we were taught, I'm not moved by what I see. I'm not moved by what I hear. I'm not moved by what I feel. I'm only moved, I'm only moved by what I believe. Well, psychologists tell us and neuroscientists tell us. Well, let me just ask you this question. Let me do it this way. What's the difference between a thought and a belief? Do you believe every thought that floats through your head is valid? Do you believe that it's solid and true? Of course not. Nobody does. So what happens, what turns a thought into a belief, what does turn a thought into a belief? Well, what turns a thought into a belief is the feeling that we invest in the belief. So your beliefs are actually the combination of information and emotion. So to say I'm only moved by what I believe is to say I'm moved by what I think and feel. Because a belief, by its very nature, by its very definition, is information and emotion put together. And the more emotion you put into that information, the stronger and more devoted you are to that belief. So if you've got a belief that you're basically a piece of garbage, that you're worthless, that your life can't get better, that it can't get fixed, that there is no hope for you, that you're powerless and worthless and whatever, if that's your belief, the stronger you feel that, the more you feel that, and the longer you feel that, the more emotional investment you're putting into that information, the stronger that belief becomes, and the more you're going to act on that belief, the more you're going to be directed by that belief, the more you're going to be guided by that belief, the more you're going to be moved by that belief. So it does behoove us then to say, and this is to say, what do I want to believe instead? Now, this is where we get messed up again, because our paradigms are so Western based in Western Christianity or the Abrahamic religions, that we think that we believe in something of absolute truth when it comes to these things. That there is an absolute truth that I'm a horrible person. There's an absolute truth that I'm worthless. It's an absolute truth that I'm whatever. And so I can't believe something because it's not true. And I would encourage you to ask a different question. Is this belief serving me? Is this belief empowering me? Is it helping me? Is it uplifting me? Is it making me a better person? Is it helping me to make better contact with people? Is it helping me to make my contributions and give my service to the world? And if you say no, then you can simply ask yourself, what do I want to draw onto my map? What do I want to put onto my map? What do I want to believe about myself that's going to be more empowering? So certainly, beliefs that are going to give you confidence, beliefs that are going to make you feel better about yourself, are certainly going to be more empowering for you to help you get to where you want to be than those other negative beliefs. So I don't understand for the life of me why. I had somebody tell me a few months ago that my atmosphere was toxic because I taught the power of positive thinking. And I thought, what in the world can be toxic about the power of positive thinking? Now I get it. It can be toxic. Again, the lion will lay down with the lamb. It can be toxic if I'm elevating, positive thinking to this sort of idolatrous level that says it's the end all be all. And there is such a thing as toxic positivity, in the sense that people can become so confident, that can become so positive about things that they neglect to see danger when it shows up in their lives. They neglect to see a threat when it shows up in their lives. I already gave examples of that. People that are so positive about faith healing or the power of positive thinking and its ability to heal their body, that they ignore symptoms that if they would have gotten early intervention for those symptoms, they'd be fine today, and instead they're dead. That there can be toxicity to that, but this is again where there's balance and there's harmonizing and things like that. Now, let me bring this over to the spiritual side and what I said last week. Hopefully I'm able to make some sense out of this and unpack this a little bit and nuance this for you guys a little bit better. Again, you may have never experienced, let's see. This comment just came up. I'm going to read it. It says, Lulu Marie says, realizing that each human is born divine and how intrinsically valuable each of us is by far the most favorite part of my awakening. Love that. So I'm going to use that, if you don't mind. Realizing that, that you're born divine. You may have never tapped into your divine nature. You may have never tapped into it in a way that you can experience it. You may have never tapped into the potential of what it is to be a divine human, to tap into your divine spirit, to tap into your intuitions, to tap into a way of experiencing higher realms, a way of experiencing how when you tap into that divine potential, you partake of that divine nature, that you literally can change things on the physical plane. You literally can work things like the law of attraction that will cause things to change and happen for you for the benefit of yourself and for the benefit of others. You may have never experienced that. You may hear somebody like me or Barbara Simons or Jeff Turner or other people that I've had on my Sunday morning lives who've talked about their experiences. And you may say, well, that never happened to me. I never experienced that. How come I never experienced that? Okay. This is where belief becomes essential. This is where belief becomes essential. If you don't believe that at your core, there is a divine flame, there is a divine light, and you won't go looking for it. It's just like I said with the purple PT Cruiser, right? Like, I never saw them before. I buy one, all of a sudden I'm seeing it everywhere. So this stuff kind of works like that. Like, until you can get to the place that you are somewhat at least persuaded that you're part of source energy, that you have a divine core, a divine spark, until you become at least somewhat persuaded that there are, I believe all of us have a spiritual team that's watching out for us. Whether you want to call it guardian angels, whether you want that to be ancestors, whether you believe that's your starseed family, whatever you believe, this doesn't matter to me. I just believe that we all have access. We all have that going on in our lives. So if you don't believe that, you're not going to be able to experience anything like that. If you don't believe that you have a spirit, an energetic body, you're never going to be able to sense the flow of what's happening in that energetic body, because if you don't believe it, to you, it doesn't exist. So in this context and in this sense, I'm not saying go against your map of reality. What I am saying is consider what could happen if you added onto that map to include some of these things. So instead of being met with paranormal, supernatural, metaphysical truths and realities with outright skepticism. See, this is where a lot of people are at. This is where the scientific materialist is at. This is where the angry atheist is at. This is where the dogmatic materialist is at. They have a doorman that stands at the gateway of their perceptions, or at the doorway of their perceptions. And when they're confronted with the possibility of divinity, they're confronted with the possibility of something beyond. They're confronted with the possibility of their own divinity, their own eternal self and reality, their own eternal soul. They immediately have programs, an internal part that slams the door on that with skepticism, that automatically is skeptical, that automatically assumes, consciously or subconsciously, that that's probably bullshit. So any experience that they might have, they are not allowed to have, because they have so defensively put stationed that soldier, if you will, as the gatekeeper and the doorkeeper to their heart and minds concerning those truths and those realities. So what I'm saying is you don't have to deny anything about your past experience or about what you believe or about what you feel. All you have to do is add the possibility of these other beliefs. In other words, quit meeting it with skepticism. Explore it a little bit. Look into it a little bit. Try some things. Don't take yourself so seriously. Maybe you've tried meditation for a month and you haven't experienced anything. Well, see, it's not for me. Don't take yourself so seriously. Maybe try doing meditation in a different way. Maybe try some other avenue of connecting. A lot of people are able to connect by being out in nature. Some people find it easier to connect with angels because of their Catholic upbringing, or saints because of their Catholic upbringing. Other people maybe are more comfortable trying to connect with ancestors. And I'm not saying you should just run out and try to connect with entities. I don't think that's safe or necessarily even a good idea. I'm just trying to explain the difference for this person and their question between what I'm trying to say when I'm saying beliefs can help you. Like at some point, you do have to believe something that goes against what you feel if you want to change. And you're not going to feel it at first, because remember, feeling is a key component of belief. So you may feel very skeptical about this stuff, but you may want to explore it. So understand that you're going to feel skeptical, but that does not mean that it does not exist. That's just a map. That map could be wrong. That map could be distorted. That map could be insufficient and incomplete. And so you can realize that you're going to feel that, and you may have to say, no, that's just a map. That may not be correct. That may not be right. That may be totally wrong. Just like you would if you had a lot of self-hatred. I mean, if you want to stay in self-hatred, if you want to stay in negativity, be my guest. I mean, you're welcome to do that. Some people, I assume, get more satisfaction out of life that way. But I know there are a lot of people that don't want to be in that space, and they want something that will help them to get out of that space, and to get out of that space of negativity, negative thinking, negative feeling, depression, anxiety, whatever. You've got to start challenging your negativity inside and say, yes, I felt this way. Yes, I believed this way, but it may not be true. It may not be accurate. It makes perfect sense that I would believe this because of the trauma that I experienced. It makes perfect sense that I would believe this because of the messaging that I received growing up, but it could all be a lie. It could all be BS. It could all just be garbage. And there could be other truths about me. And if I would start affirming and believing and feeling into and leaning into other truths about myself, about my divine potential, about my inherent worth and value, about my uniqueness, about my ability to be empowered to get up off this mat that life has knocked me down on, right? And so I start encouraging myself, and I start leaning into those beliefs, and I start challenging the negative beliefs. That's the only way that I know of, effectively proven scientifically through studies with cognitive behavioral therapy and everything else like that, to move out of that space. So there are times, and there are times to say, I'm no longer believing that, even though you are. I'm no longer being guided by that, even though to some extent you are. But to push against that, not in a repressed sort of way. It's in a surrendered sort of way. It's in a way in which the lion lays down with the lamb. It's a way in which the child plays with the cobra. You can think about it in that way. The child plays with the cobra. I'm coming with childlikeness to this belief with curiosity of a child, not being threatened by it, not being afraid of it, wanting to understand its nature, but also not wanting to become the cobra. So let me look at, see if there's any comments, any other comments. See, Debbie says, just introducing the idea that maybe this is just a pattern, I think, could make crack in the wall. That sounds very doable. Great. I'm not sure what pattern is. Maybe, oh, this meaning the negativity. Got it. Joe Machuda says, makes perfect sense. One thing that comes to mind is that over a millennia, the spiritual world has been given across cultures. It is only with the materialist map that people have lost touch with the supernatural, and that is merely 150 years at most. Yeah, you're right about that. I think it would shock people to know that most of the people in early pioneers of the Age of Reason were also Hermeticists. So anyway, let me just look on Facebook. Hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully it made sense. And hopefully a blessing. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this episode. I'll be back with you again next week. And